Well, tonight, a jury in Kenosha, Wisconsin is expected to begin deliberations in the murder trial of Kyle Rittenhouse. The 18-year-old could get up to life in prison if convicted of the most serious charge, first-degree intentional homicide for killing two men at a violent protest. CBS's Nancy Chen was at the courthouse for today's dramatic closing arguments. Good evening, Nancy.
Nora, good evening to you. Today, the judge dismissed one count of illegal gun possession. He also allowed the jury to consider two lesser charges, which mean less severe consequences, but also make a conviction more likely.
Him putting the fire extinguisher on the ground and then raising the gun.
In closing arguments, prosecutors showed jurors this video of Kyle Rittenhouse raising his AR-15 style rifle at a protester, Joseph Rosenbaum. Moments later, it led to this chase, and Rittenhouse shooting Rosenbaum 4 times at close range.
A second shot, which goes through Mr. Rosenbaum's hand, and then a third and fourth shot, one that grazes the right scalp and one that goes right into Mr. Rosenbaum's back. And that is the kill shot.
Prosecutors argued that Rittenhouse instigated the shootings that left 2 men, including Rosenbaum, dead and one seriously injured.
When the defendant provokes the incident, he loses the right to self-defense. You cannot claim self-defense against a danger you create.
Today, Rittenhouse's defense attorney told the jury his client acted in self-defense.
My client ran 2 blocks without shooting at anyone, pointing at anyone, doing anything to try and get away.
While running away, Rittenhouse shot and killed another man, Anthony Huber, who hit him with a skateboard. Rittenhouse then shot and wounded Gage Grosskreutz. During 8 days of testimony, the jury heard from more than 30 witnesses.
So I didn't do anything wrong. I defended myself.
But the pivotal moment came from Rittenhouse himself, who broke down on the stand.
People right there.
In court, Kyle's mother, Wendy, has been by his side. She told me her son has remorse for what happened that night.
So in talking to him, he does regret going that night now?
Yeah, he does. In the beginning, you know, he said yes, but now he wouldn't go.
And Kenosha is paying close attention as this trial nears a verdict. Wisconsin's governor has put 500 National Guard members on standby for potential unrest, Nora.
Nancy Chen, thank you. We want to turn now to some breaking news out of Aurora, Colorado. 6 teenagers were rushed to hospitals after a gunman opened fire at a park near Aurora Central High School. No shots were fired at the school, but it was quickly shut down and parents picked up their children. The shooter is still on the loose. The motive for the attack not known. All right, turning overseas now. Britain raised its terrorism threat.
And Ohio Senator Rob Portman, a lead negotiator.
This is what can happen when Republicans and Democrats decide we're going to work together to get something done.
On the other side, moderate Kirsten Sinema of Arizona.
This is what it looks like when elected leaders set aside differences, shut out the noise, and focus on delivering results on the issues that matter most to everyday Americans.
For some Americans, the impact will be felt immediately. New Yorkers won't see a subway fare increase or service cuts. Kentucky and Ohio hoping for much-needed repairs on the Brent Spence Bridge. And in Louisiana, the Calcasieu Bridge in desperate need of a fix. But the White House acknowledges many projects will take time.
When will Americans start to see this in their communities in a very real way?
Well, there are some components that we are going to see rather quickly and some that will take a little bit more time. This is not designed to be a stimulus bill. This is designed to be something that is spent out over time.
That is the key question, Cecilia. How soon do we see it? Cecilia with us live from the White House. You and I were on the air this afternoon for this bill signing into law, and you were saying the president knows this, the White House knows this, that this victory was needed, especially given these new poll numbers, this dismal approval rating for the president.
David, 42%. He is currently underwater as we speak. The president, the White House, Democrats all know that he needs to now get out there and convince Americans that this infrastructure plan will directly benefit them and their families. So he is going to take this sales pitch on the road. He starts in New Hampshire tomorrow, where he will be visiting a crumbling bridge. He will later in the week go to Michigan, where he'll be talking about electric vehicles. Given those poll numbers, giving those looming midterms, David, no coincidence. Those are 2 key battleground states.
Right to the battleground. Cecilia Vega with us tonight. Thank you, Cecilia. And we should note that you heard the president there compare our infrastructure spending to China's. Well, President Biden tonight holding a virtual meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. The two leaders planning to discuss ways to manage the growing competition between the two countries, their first presidential meeting. Now to the pandemic tonight and to the surge in cases with the colder weather now here. More Americans, of course, inside. And just as the holidays approach, tonight, new cases are up 23% across the country. Today, what Dr. Anthony Fauci said about Thanksgiving and upcoming family gatherings. And we're also tracking something else here, a pocket of flu cases, hundreds of them, that authorities are now tracking with growing concern tonight. Here's Stephanie Ramos.
Despite signs of a winter COVID surge, health experts say vaccinated Americans can gather for traditional holidays.
If you get vaccinated and your family's vaccinated, you can feel good about enjoying a typical Thanksgiving, Christmas with your family and close friends.
Since the end of October, new COVID cases are up 23% across the country and up 22% among children. And there's now a growing push to expand booster shots to all adults ahead of an official decision from the FDA. New York, Arkansas, and likely New Jersey will join 4 other states in allowing booster shots for all adults. The governor and mayor of New York urging anyone who wants a booster to get one.
We got to stay ahead of COVID. So we have a tool, and it works, and that's booster shots.
Officials at a Connecticut nursing home suspect waning immunity played a role in an outbreak that infected 89 residents, killing 8. They say all but 2 residents and staff were fully vaccinated, and none of the residents had gotten a booster yet.
It's really interesting. Stephanie with us tonight. And Steph, Dr. Jha has said right here on this broadcast that we have to be prepared for a potentially severe flu season as well, especially because so many of us have been wearing masks, social distancing, and many haven't built up any immunity. And I know tonight authorities are tracking an outbreak in Michigan that has them concerned.
Yes, David, the CDC right now is on the ground at the University of Michigan studying a sudden flu outbreak that has infected more than 300 people in just the last week. Fewer people are getting the flu vaccine this year, and health officials want people to know it is okay to get both the flu and COVID vaccines at the same time. David?
Stephanie Ramos tonight. Thank you, Stephanie. We turn next this evening to Steve Bannon, a longtime aide to former President Trump, surrendering to authorities to face criminal contempt of Congress charges today after Bannon's refusal to cooperate with the House committee investigating the January 6th riot. Today, a defiant Bannon and what he said after telling his listeners the day before the January 6th attack that all hell is going to break loose tomorrow. Here's our chief Washington correspondent, Jonathan Karl, tonight.
As he turned himself in today, Steve Bannon was as defiant as ever.
We're going to go on the offense. We're tired of playing defense. We're going to go on the offense on this and stand by.
Bannon is charged with 2 counts of contempt of Congress and faces up to 2 years behind bars if found guilty for refusing to comply with a subpoena issued by the House committee investigating the January 6th riot. The committee says Bannon is key to its investigation, pointing to what he said on his podcast the day before the riot.
All hell is going to break loose tomorrow.
Bannon told Trump supporters, quote, "This is your time in history."
All I can say is strap in. You have made this happen, and tomorrow it's game day.
But Bannon has refused to testify because he says that former President Trump told him not to. Democrats say his prosecution should be a warning to everyone else who refuses to cooperate. But Bannon today was full of bluster, vowing to fight back.
I'm never going to back down, and they took on the wrong guy this time.
Mr. Bannon, on January 5th.
They took on the wrong guy.
Other former Trump aides who have been subpoenaed by the committee are undoubtedly watching very closely what is happening with Bannon. Former Chief of Staff Mark Meadows is likely to be held in contempt by the January 6th committee in the coming weeks, putting him in legal jeopardy. And David, it would also put him in a position of being the first former member of the House to be held in contempt of Congress.
All right, Jonathan Karl watching it all for us again tonight. John, thank you. And now to the images coming in after a shooting near a high school in Aurora, Colorado that left 6 teens wounded. Police tonight searching for several suspects. One witness saying the shots came from a vehicle passing by a park near Aurora Central High School and that there was some return fire from that park. The school on lockdown for a time. Authorities say the wounded teens are between the ages of 14 and 18. The police chief just a short time ago.
When I got the call, my heart dropped. I think as many as most of you felt the exact same way, and I think enough is enough, and I think we need to come together as a community. This is a public health crisis. This is not all on law enforcement. We need to get out through to our kids and figure out a way to stop this.
All of the injured are expected to survive. Now to the trial of 3 men in the shooting death of Ahmaud Arbery, the defense calling for a mistrial after the Reverend Jesse Jackson appeared in court to support Arbery's family. Here's Steve Osunsami.
This is what defense lawyers were so upset about that had them calling for the whole trial to be thrown out. They noticed that jurors were reacting after seeing Reverend Jesse Jackson in one of the limited seats in the courtroom with his arms around the victim's mother as she was crying.
How many pastors does the Arbery family have? We had the Reverend Al Sharpton here earlier, last week.
This same defense lawyer has already been called a racist after the way he complained just last week about how the family of 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery continues to give a seat to black pastors.
Your Honor, the seats in the public gallery of a courtroom are not like courtside seats at a Lakers game.
It was during a neighbor's testimony when Wanda Cooper broke down as prosecutors shared a photo of her son. The judge didn't agree to a mistrial, and the prosecution of the 3 white men accused of murder continues. Jurors today got to see the shotgun used in the killing.
If the wood were the T-shirt that you've described, could you show the jury how close that gun would be to that T-shirt?
It's just an approximation, but it's going to be close to the wood, close to the shirt.
The 3 men have pled not guilty, saying they were making a citizen's arrest under then Georgia law. But at the neighborhood construction site where their suspicion started, police say that the victim is never seen taking anything and was just walking around. Outside the courthouse, Reverend Jackson promised to take up a seat in court as long as he's offered one, calling it a moral obligation. Prosecutors could wind down their case in the next couple of days. If the defense takes nearly as long, this trial could push well into the week of Thanksgiving and possibly beyond. David.
All right, Steve Osunsami, our thanks to you, Steve, again tonight. We are following a developing situation overseas tonight. The UK has just raised the terror alert to severe. That is the second highest level after a car explosion and attack outside a hospital in Liverpool. Here are the images. That explosion inside a taxi, killing the passenger and injuring the driver just as the vehicle was pulling up to the hospital. Authorities tonight with that new alert warning another attack is highly likely. Here's our foreign correspondent, James Longman.
Tonight, this explosion outside a UK hospital declared a terrorist incident. Watch as this taxi driver pulls up outside Liverpool's Women's Hospital. Moments later, the roof is blown off. The driver jumps out, another man rushing to his aid. But a passenger is still inside that now burning car. Police say that person was 32-year-old terror suspect Emad Al-Swalmin, killed by his homemade bomb. Details are still unclear, but the driver, named by local media as David Perry, is being praised for his quick thinking. The mayor of Liverpool saying he may have locked the car doors as he escaped so as to stop Al-Swalmin from continuing his attack. Amazingly, Perry escaped with only minor injuries. And tonight, police carrying out a controlled explosion at an address linked to the suspect.
The British people will never be cowed by terrorism.
Not cowed, but alert. The UK's terror threat has now been raised to severe, the second highest level, meaning an attack is, quote, highly likely.
And David, tonight the police say the 4 men arrested have now been released after questioning, but investigators say they're paying particular attention to a device that would have been constructed at one of the addresses searched. David.
All right, James Longman on the breaking developments tonight. James, thank you. And one more note overseas from Myanmar tonight. The American journalist sentenced last week to 11 years of hard labor is on his way back home to Michigan tonight. Former U.S. Ambassador Bill Richardson helped win Danny Fenster's release in a case that the State Department had called profoundly unjust, the only foreign journalist to be convicted after Myanmar's military coup. When we come back on a Monday night, the small plane crashing in Tampa and the escape as that plane was going underwater.
Week and the start of the weekend as we get back to 50 and we'll cool down again on Sunday. Stay with us, Dakota News Now. We'll be right back after the break.
Dakota News Now.
The term reasonable doubt means a doubt based upon reason and common sense. It is a doubt for which a reason can be given. A reasonable doubt is not a doubt which is based on mere guesswork or speculation. That's what the defense is asking you to do, to guess what Mr. Rosenbaum was doing, to speculate what Mr. Rosenbaum was doing, to speculate and guess what Mr. Huber and this unidentified man were doing. We don't know because he killed 2 of them. All we can look at is the evidence and see him standing pretty much straight up, or exactly straight up, when he was shot in the hip and immobilized. A doubt which arises merely from sympathy or from fear to return a verdict of guilt is not a reasonable doubt. The defense's whole case has been trying to stoke sympathy for Mr. Rittenhouse and showing how everyone else was just a terrible person. Every life counts. Every life matters. If people did bad things that night, they could have been prosecuted. It's not up for Mr. Rittenhouse to be the judge, the jury, and eventually the executioner. A reasonable doubt is not a doubt such as may be used to escape the responsibility of a decision. There's a lot going on in this case. We all know that. We all knew that from the day we walked in on November 1st. But this verdict should be about what the facts are and what Mr. Rittenhouse did. That's what the 12 of you who go to deliberate will go and decide. You are the fact finders. You decide what is beyond a reasonable doubt. You decide what he is guilty or not guilty of from this menu of options that you now have. An imminent threat. The only imminent threat that night was Mr. Rittenhouse. He was not acting in legal, justified self-defense. He's guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Krause. Members of the jury, the time has now come when the great burden of reaching a just, fair, and conscientious decision in this case will be placed wholly with you jurors selected for this most important duty. You will not be swayed by sympathy, passion, prejudice, or political beliefs. You will disregard any impression which you may have regarding what you believe to be my opinions on the guilt or innocence of the defendant. You will disregard the claims or opinions of any other person, or news media or social networking site. You will pay no heed to the opinions of anyone, even the President of the United States or the President before him. The founders of our country gave you, and you alone, power and the duty to decide this case based solely on the evidence presented in this court. You will fearlessly keep faith with those who have entrusted to you the fair rendition of justice and the protection of our freedom. You will be very careful and deliberate in weighing the evidence. I charge you to keep your duties steadfastly in mind. And
teenager Kyle Rittenhouse. In fact, we can show you right now. We are watching some of the court proceedings, including the judge instructing the jury. Now, Rittenhouse was indicted for murder.
Aside and must not affect your deliberations. It will be for you to determine whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty as to each of the offenses charged or submitted. You must make a finding as to each count of the information. Each count charges a separate crime, and you must consider each one separately. Your verdict for the crime charged in one count must not affect your verdict on any other. This is a criminal and not a civil case, and therefore, before you can reach a verdict which may lawfully be received, it must be reached unanimously. In a criminal case, all 12 jurors must agree in order to arrive at a verdict. When you retire to the jury room,
his bill, the Biden infrastructure bill,
vote is not entitled to any greater weight.
To the jury. We're going to have complete coverage on HLN beginning at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. But
that is the core of this prosecution's case, making the argument that the individual, the defendant, is the one who created the danger, who provoked the clash, and, according to the facts in the video that they showed, is the only person who killed anybody.
How many would like to start at 9? All right, that's the clear consensus. Well, it's not a consensus, but clear plurality, probably majority, I think. And so we'll start at 9 tomorrow, as we have been. The case is ready for decision by a jury of 12. We don't have that. And it's just as important as ever. I'd say more so, except that it was always important, that you not discuss the case with anyone. And you won't have to resist that much longer now because you'll be able to decide the case. Please don't read, watch, or listen to any account of the trial or anything to do with the trial. And tomorrow morning we'll assemble, and as I indicated earlier, the tumbler over there will be used. All of your numbers will be placed in there. And 6 of the, well, assuming there are still 18 of you, 6 of them will be drawn out. And those persons will be held in reserve and will not join the 12 in deliberation. We're going to retain you here in the building, those of you who are not selected. Will stay here in the building.
And obviously we'll follow all of what's coming out of Kenosha, Wisconsin as well. Thank you, gentlemen. There was other news today. For example,
Self-defense can be a valid defense to a murder charge.
Insurance from Liberty Mutual, so they only pay for what they need.
Watch or listen to any account of the trial. Any questions, anybody? Enjoy the evening. We'll see you tomorrow.
There's Judge Bruce Schrader. The prosecution and the defense, they've made their respective arguments. Now it's in the hands of the jury. CNN's Omar Jimenez is in Kenosha. He's been covering this from day one. Omar, very dramatic statements, arguments from both sides today.
That's right, Wolf. Really, on the prosecution side, they tried to paint a few arguments in this. Most recently, during the rebuttal that many of us have been listening to, you heard the prosecution say this case isn't about Kyle Rittenhouse just defending himself. It's not even saying that someone like Joseph Rosenbaum, the first killed that night, shouldn't have been chasing him. What this comes down to is, did Kyle Rittenhouse have the right to use deadly force against those that were coming up against him? And the prosecution argued that there was no imminent threat of death, and they argued that the defense made assumptions that Kyle Rittenhouse would have had great bodily harm or even further. The defense said that Kyle Rittenhouse never would have shot anyone if he were not attacked, and even went as far as to say that he never shot anyone until he was actually cornered by some of the people that were chasing him. You heard the jury break for the day and saying that now, tomorrow morning, the decision will be in their hands once they draw those final 12. And to give you an idea of what they'll be looking at, they'll be following instructions hammered out by prosecutors, defense, and the judge about 2 or multiple key definitions, but 2 in particular. When you look at self-defense, it critically says that Rittenhouse could use deadly force only to prevent imminent death or great bodily harm to himself. But also, what they'll be looking at is the definition of provocation, again, hammered out by those parties, saying that a person who provokes an attack can't use or threaten force in self-defense until he has exhausted every other reasonable means to escape death or great bodily harm. And those will be 2 very key cruxes that the jury will be considering once they, of course, reconvene back tomorrow morning. But we've seen both sides.
Pistachios.
David.
On his mother and his hope.
Even when you struggle with something as hard as that, it might be tough, it might be hard, you can always fight.
A son's love. Good night.
Like these, it's good to know there's a place where people know who you are, no matter how long you've been gone. A place where the smells of home cooking are still in the air, where a simple wave warms your heart.
Out of them. We'll see lows in the 30s. Rapid City will turn breezy, and then tomorrow's going to be windy across Keloland with a westerly wind turning to the northwest. It's going to be very warm in Sioux Falls, 60.
Investigate TV tackles the top topics. When your health is compromised, we investigate. Corporate greed exposed. The powerful held accountable with in-depth journalism led by award-winning journalist Lee Zurich. Download Investigate TV for your Roku and Amazon Fire devices.
Arby's, 2 for $6.
Former CEO.
We talked with a mother who lost a son due to gun violence and what she's doing to bring awareness to this deadly issue.
Plus, the latest developments from lawmakers looking into a meeting between Governor Kristi Noem, her daughter, and the state's appraiser program.
Good evening. Sanford Health's golden parachute for its former CEO, Kelby Krabenhoff, is truly lined with gold.
He received a total of $49 million from the health system upon his departure. Keloland's Angela Kennecke.
Last year, the prosecution saying Rittenhouse went looking for trouble. Rittenhouse's attorneys arguing he acted in self-defense. And the charge thrown out today by the judge. Our team is at the courthouse. Also tonight, bipartisan celebrations at the White House. President Biden signing his trillion-dollar infrastructure bill into law. Money for roads, bridges, and broadband. And this evening, the critical meeting. Tensions high as the president and China's leader hold a virtual summit. Trump ally Steve Bannon surrendering to the FBI to face charges for refusing to comply with the January 6th investigation. His defiant words. The shooting near a Colorado high school, multiple children injured. What we're learning. Fears of a new COVID surge heading into the holidays. Cases rising in nearly half the U.S. and the major city joining several states, jumping ahead of the CDC to offer boosters to all adults. The terror blast at a UK hospital and the taxi driver hailed as a hero. The rising prices for your family's Thanksgiving meal, how to save. And the 13-year-old whose wish is inspiring America.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening, everyone. 2 closing arguments today and 2 very different portraits of Kyle Rittenhouse as the homicide case is about to go to the jury, which will now have 1 less count to deliberate. The judge today dismissing the charge of illegal gun possession. The teenage gunman who killed 2 people and wounded another during a Wisconsin protest last year, described by the prosecution as having provoked the violent encounter and then walking off like a hero in a Western. The defense, however, arguing Rittenhouse had been ambushed and fired in self-defense. Tonight, authorities in Kenosha are on high alert as a tense verdict watch is about to begin. Gabe Gutierrez is there with the latest.
He is guilty of all counts.
Tonight, Kyle Rittenhouse's fate is about to be in the hands of the jury as closing arguments wrap up in his double homicide trial.
He showed no remorse for his victims, never tried to help anybody that he hurt.
The prosecutor replaying videos of the shootings from multiple angles, frame by frame, arguing that Rittenhouse shot and killed 2 men and wounded a third last August during unrest in Kenosha because he was a wannabe soldier looking for trouble.
When the defendant provokes the incident, he loses the right to self-defense. You cannot claim self-defense against a danger you create.
The defense zeroing in on Joseph Rosenbaum, the first man Rittenhouse shot, arguing he was belligerent and chased after Rittenhouse.
He was causing trouble, he was a rioter, and my client had to deal with him that night alone.
Rittenhouse's attorney insisting his client was not an active shooter and there was a rush to judgment.
Kyle was a 17-year-old kid out there trying to help this community.
Today, the judge dismissed the 6th count against Rittenhouse, illegal gun possession by a minor, a misdemeanor. Rittenhouse's attorneys argued the AR-15 style rifle was not short-barreled, so the Wisconsin law did not apply. He now faces 5 felony counts, including intentional homicide. The attorney for Gage Grosskreutz, the shooting survivor, says Rittenhouse created the carnage himself.
He fashioned himself as this self-deputized police officer who also was a medic. He didn't do anything medically for anybody.
When you hear your son referred to as a vigilante, what do you make of that?
It angers me.
Wendy Rittenhouse says she did not drive her son to Kenosha that night, but she has no doubt he acted in self-defense.
Was your son looking for trouble?
No. Kyle never looks for trouble. He is a caring young man. and he likes to help people.
As a mother, do you want him to go down there with an AR-15 rifle?
I didn't want him going anywhere near Kenosha whatsoever.
So, Gabe, where do things stand right now? Does the jury formally have the case?
Potentially any moment now, Lester. The prosecution is still offering its final rebuttal. The case would then go to the jury, but it's unclear whether they'll begin deliberations tonight or wait until tomorrow, Lester.
Gabe Gutierrez in Kenosha, thank you. Late today, President Biden signed that $1 trillion infrastructure bill into law, calling it a historic investment. But in the midst of rising inflation, a new poll tonight shows the president's approval rating is suffering. Peter Alexander is at the White House.
President Biden tonight touting his biggest legislative victory to date.
Despite the cynics, Democrats and Republicans can come together and deliver results. We can do this.
Signing into law that $1 trillion infrastructure bill surrounded by Democrats and a small number of Republicans. The largest federal investment in infrastructure in more than a decade will provide good-paying jobs, the White House says, directing $110 billion to upgrade roads and bridges, $65 billion to improve high-speed internet, and $15 billion to replace lead pipes in the country's drinking water system.
My message to the American people is this: America's moving again, and your life is going to change for the better.
Still, the celebration may be short-lived. The latest poll shows the president's approval rating continuing to drop, even after the infrastructure bill was passed, with Democrats still divided whether to spend another $1.75 trillion on his social program and climate plan, and as Americans' paychecks are stretched. Inflation soaring to a 31-year high, prices surging across the board, including gas jumping 50%, beef costing 20% more. Just today, Tyson Foods saying it's raised its beef, pork, and chicken prices because of escalating expenses. Kiana Cook in Maryland is struggling to pay the spiking costs.
Chuck Rose could feed my niece and her kids, and it's about like this, $35, $25. Just absolutely outrageous.
The Moser family in Pennsylvania also feeling the pinch.
Spending $100 a week in gas is very taxing.
Things that I would normally, spend maybe $1.50 to $2 on, I'm spending $3.75 on.
And another critical test for the president late tonight, a virtual summit with China's President Xi. White House officials already lowering expectations for the meeting, saying not to expect any concrete outcomes, but that President Biden will tell Xi he, quote, expects him to play by the rules of the road and will confront the Chinese leader on Beijing's unfair economic practices, its poor human rights record, and threats toward Taiwan.
And Peter, let's circle back to that infrastructure law. How does the president now tout it to the American people?
Yeah, Lester, President Biden will head to New Hampshire tomorrow and then the next day to Michigan. Meanwhile, Democrats will have to go it alone to pass his climate and social policy plans, with inflation now complicating their efforts to get some moderates to back that kind of massive new spending. Lester?
Peter Alexander at the White House. Thanks. Tonight, the State Department is calling a Russian missile test in space reckless and irresponsible. That missile targeted an old Russian satellite, producing debris that threatens Americans and others on board the International Space Station.
A similar project is now underway, this time by Midco. Cordell Wright in studio with more details for us tonight. Cordell.
Good evening, Brian and Andrea. This summer, Midco launched what they call the Fiber Forward Project, with the goal of bringing fiber optic internet closer to the people of Sioux Falls. Construction crews began working in different neighborhoods across the city, bringing with them these green pedestals. Some homeowners describe them, as you said, eyesores. The senior vice president of operations at Midco said they tried to minimize installing new boxes by working on already existing facilities. After speaking with several homeowners from a neighborhood in south central Sioux Falls, their number one concern was communication. Some saying they were notified of upcoming construction, some saying that they were not.
We can't guarantee that every resident received the communication that we sent. We do try our best, but it's impossible that things are missed. And so in the event that they do have a concern, they can absolutely give us a call, visit our website, reach out to us on social media through any of those channels, and we'll make sure that we can address their concerns.
Midco says that if you have seen any construction in your yard and have those concerns, you can reach out to them on their website or call them directly. The number is on your screen. Andrea?
All right, Cordell, thank you. Well, coming up, we'll meet a senior from
down the Biden regime.
His more immediate challenge is a federal grand jury indictment, 2 counts charging contempt of Congress for refusing to produce documents or show up for questioning by the House committee investigating the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol. During a brief hearing in federal court, he was formally advised of the charges, released, and will enter a plea Thursday. Outside the courthouse, a defiant Bannon said he'll fight the charges, which he called politically motivated.
I'm telling you right now, this is going to be the misdemeanor from hell for Merrick Garland, Nancy Pelosi, and Joe Biden.
Bannon is the only former Trump White House aide subpoenaed who has totally refused to cooperate because the former president asserted executive privilege. 15 others have been subpoenaed.
If they're willing to talk to the committee about non-privileged matters, if they're willing to negotiate with the committee rather than just make a blanket assertion of privilege, they don't really have anything to fear. They won't be charged.
It's clear tonight that Bannon will argue that he was simply following the advice of his lawyers when he declined to even show up to answer the committee's questions. And in some past contempt cases, that defense has been successful. Lester?
All right, Pete, thank you. We're following a developing story tonight in Colorado where police say 6 teenagers were shot and wounded in Aurora, just outside Denver. It happened in a park near a high school. All 6 of the teens are students at the school and are expected to survive. The school was placed on lockdown. Police looking for multiple suspects who fired from a car and on foot. Tonight, growing concern about the pandemic with new COVID cases rising in almost 24 states. Many see it as a clear sign of a winter surge. Now, several states and New York City are offering boosters to all adults ahead of FDA and CDC authorization.
Okay, and that could be very significant. You talk about compromise. They may see something as a compromise that, you know, maybe they wouldn't see that way if they knew that, but they don't know that, which is could be very significant. Mayor Rawlings Blake, what's your prediction for what happens here? How long deliberations go? Again, they're going to meet tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. They're going to pick out of a random hat who are the 12, and they're going to go. And what do you think happens then?
I think this is probably one lottery that these jurors do not want to win. I do not envy them at all. I would say I don't anticipate them deliberating for long. This was not even though the charges were serious, this was not a very long trial. The evidence is going to be fresh in their minds, and some key things that the prosecution said today will be fresh in their mind. The prosecutor said that, you know, a reasonable person wouldn't be out there at night past curfew, but yet you have the footage, the video footage of hundreds of people out there. You know, they're asking this jury to pick who's wrong out of a melee. So I just don't see them deliberating for an extended period of time. And I think the more serious charges will, I predict he'll be acquitted on the more serious charges.
This is pretty incredible.
The driver ended up calling police. Officers later found the red van the man was driving outside of a motel.
The gun, I'll use that term loosely, but it was actually a lighter that you pull the trigger and the flame comes out. That was found inside the vehicle.
Police arrested Terrell Flute for aggravated assault, resisting arrest, and parole violation. A Sioux Falls woman is behind bars, charged with beating her ex-girlfriend and then refusing to let her leave her apartment for a day and a half.
Police say Patricia Villarandra hit, kicked, and punched the woman more than 100 times, but her injuries were not serious. Villarandra faces a handful of charges, including kidnap and abuse.
A Sioux Falls man is behind bars accused of inappropriately touching a 14-year-old girl at a gas station. Police say that the girl was waiting to buy something Saturday afternoon when the man leaned over and grabbed her between the legs.
The girl went outside and told her family, who called police. Officers arrested 51-year-old Sean Castor. He is charged with sexual contact with a child under the age of 16.
All right, let's get a check of our weather. It sounds like tomorrow is going to be warm but windy.
Warm and windy.
Absolutely. And
Bill's back in just a moment with
voted against this. I'm quoting Congressman Warren Davidson from Western Ohio. He said, among other things, it's pork-laden, it's not narrowly tailored. which is what we need. It's reckless spending. How do you answer that?
Well, you know, Senator Portman, an Ohio Republican, spoke today at the signing, and he really went through how the bipartisan action in the Senate happened, where we did have 69 votes for this in the Senate. What happens, I think, that makes it so difficult in Washington, D.C., is things get mired in partisanship. 63% of the Americans support this infrastructure bill. It's a huge number. So it does have bipartisan support across the country. What I think is frustrating for us as mayors that try to just keep on moving and get stuff done is that a lot of times when it comes to this town, everybody gets in their corners. Now, I'm happy to see on this bill, we actually saw bipartisan support. First time we've seen it in a really long time. And so we saw people like Senator Portman or Congressman Gonzalez in Ohio vote yes for this.
And Mayor Holt, your party, the Republican Party, much more opposition. Mayor Whaley's right. Polls were showing bipartisan support, but Republican support seems to be sliding. The entire Oklahoma delegation voted against it. And then you have the comments from former President Trump. He's saying it's a non-infrastructure bill. He's very sad that rhinos, Republicans in name only, were for this. He says he's ashamed that Republicans who voted for it should be ashamed of themselves.
Well, I mean, a lot did. You know, I know not all by any means, but, you know, Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell voted for this.
Right.
You know, we had a letter from 400 mayors, bipartisan mayors across the country in all 50 states supporting this. You know, my state chamber of commerce supported this bill. I mean, I get, as Nan said, that, like, you know, there's politics in this city and sort of people do things that have different motivations than just the face of the policy. But mayors have been consistent over 10 years. You know, mayors have come to that same White House in the Obama administration, in the Trump administration, and now in the Biden administration, seeking virtually the same thing, which was a major package, very similar, if not identical, to what we saw signed today. And the politics change, but the needs don't, the policy doesn't. And ultimately, I'm just glad that it passed. I don't have any grudge against anyone who voted no. But I am very grateful to the many Republicans, obviously the many Democrats who worked together to make sure it did pass and, you know, did something that needed to be done in this country, you know, regardless of the policy win here. They worked together, Republicans and Democrats worked together across these partisan lines to do something important, and I hope that this isn't the last time that happens.
And just quickly to both of you, is this political opposition, do you think, going to affect your ability to implement this?
I've noticed that even when folks vote against it, they go and tell community members what came from Washington. So I don't think it will actually affect implementation. We saw this with the American Rescue Plan money. As soon as it was passed, even folks that voted no came to Dayton to say what they gave to the community, which I find interesting. We really want to make sure it gets done, so we're fine with that. So I don't think there'll be much trouble on implementation.
Think there'll be a problem?
No. I mean, everybody will. These things, roads and bridges and transit and
everyone will be at the ribbon cutting.
Everybody likes these things, and it won't have anything to do with politics when it opens 5 years from now. They'll all be there, and that's okay.
Mayor Nan Whaley of Dayton, Ohio, Mayor David Holt of Oklahoma City, thank you both very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Judy.
An honor to be with you. Thank you.
In the day's other news, longtime ally of former President Trump, Steve Bannon, faced criminal contempt charges in Washington. He has refused to cooperate with a congressional investigation of the January assault on the U.S. Capitol. Bannon entered no plea at his initial court appearance, but outside, he declared his defiance of Congress, the President, and the Attorney General.
This is going to be the misdemeanor from hell for Merrick Garland, Nancy Pelosi, and Joe Biden. Joe Biden ordered Merrick Garland to prosecute me from the White House lawn when he got off Marine One. And we're going to go on the offense. We're tired of playing defense. We're going to go on the offense on this and stand by.
If convicted, Bannon faces a maximum 1 year in prison on each of 2 counts. On the pandemic, health officials in New York City call for all adults to get booster shots, going beyond.
Ben! Oh, nice. Kevin, where are you? Kevin!
Making health decisions for an entire population. Instead, let the individual and their doctor.
The opioid epidemic.
And my advocacy for that small state minimum.
Sport formula, uniquely formulated with garlic,
This is gonna be fun. We're gonna string some lights.
Hey Lloyd, what can I do for you today?
First Western is all of those.
Lack of fear and defiance. In fact, he seems to be kind of reveling in it.
Well, there's no question. I mean, it was kind of eerily similar to one of the seasons of Homeland, you know, where you have a figure like him who's a media figure on the right who is going to use this as a soapbox and is going to use this charge against him as a soapbox and a spectacle. And as Evan points out, there's a lot of legal maneuvering to be done here over the indictment. There's also questions about the kind of the novel legal question about access to what he knows and to those discussions. That will take time, but the politics won't wait, and the spectacle won't wait. And that's what Bannon is seizing on. He used this not only as, you know, to taunt the president and Attorney General Garland and Pelosi and all of that, but to make a broader argument that I think was more indirect, which is that the liberals, are coming for us, you know, the conservatives or those Trump supporters. That's what the message that he wants to send. And there's another piece of this too, which is there's a longer game beyond the legal questions involved. And that's the political question, because Democrats will face a time when Republicans in Congress or a Republican administration with an attorney general who might see fit to indict somebody for not complying with a subpoena to Congress of a committee. And so there will be a reverberation. And so the accusations of politicizing the Justice Department will be revived once again. But I can assure you, knowing this Attorney General, that he's taken a position here. He's not going to listen to Joe Biden. Joe Biden's not going to direct him to indict anybody.
No, Garland made that extremely clear. Now, Evan, Bannon had a lot more to say after leaving court. Let me just play a little bit more.
Right.
Well, I'm never going to back down, and they took on the wrong guy this time. If the administrative state wants to take me on, bring it, because we're here to fight this, and we're going to go on offense. And you stand by. You see how we're going to go on offense.
Okay, so it's obviously, as we pointed out, not the normal way this is done, right? But this is how he's going to do it. He's a media figure.
Yeah.
But Evan, talk to me about the judge in this case specifically, Carl Nichols, how this plays with him.
Yeah, he's a Trump appointee, and from what everyone I've talked to, he has a good reputation. But one of the interesting things about him, Aaron, is the fact that he, you know, for years was at the Justice Department, where he dealt with these exact issues, these issues of executive privilege. He was involved in a big case in the late 2000s in the end of the Bush administration. The House was trying to get was subpoenaing Harriet Miers and Josh Bolton to try to get information on the firings of U.S. attorneys at the time in that scandal. And he was the one defending against the House subpoenas. So he's got a lot of experience in this, and it's going to be interesting to see how this works. The final thing I would say is judges don't like this kind of spectacle outside the courthouse. So it's going to be interesting to see how he deals with that, especially because Bannon is a media figure. He's a podcaster, and he's going to argue, this is how I make my living, how you can't shut me down. And so we'll see how the judge manages this sideshow that will come with this case.
So
over 100 models on display. Visit airwaves to connect more expensive ones.
The people that are going to be the most impacted by this are going to be the low income, the elderly, and then people that live in those areas that do not have access to 4 or 5G, because there's no easy path to an upgrade for them. They might not be able to afford an upgrade to a 4G or a 5G phone. And that's even saying if 4 or 5G is available in their area.
Boost Mobile, which sells some of the cheapest plans out there, says more than 1 million customers could lose out and is pressing former owner T-Mobile to extend service.
Are you okay?
Some medical alert devices for seniors will also stop transmitting.
Emergency call center.
And that's it for certain roadside assistance systems in older cars from companies like Toyota and Audi. If you rely on an older home security system, medical device, or phone, check in with the manufacturer to make sure it's not going to be disconnected next year. Some companies are offering free or discounted upgrades for older devices, but you should probably reach out because while your connection may be interrupted, your billing probably won't. Lester?
Some really important information there, Jacob. Thank you. Up next, how one 13-year-old boy's wish is feeding hundreds, and it's inspiring America.
No one can deliver your... I'm upset. Phil's in tears. He'll dry those tears, and he'll have a final check of the forecast when we come back here at 6.
Late Night Laughs is your source for side-splitting comedy.
Our unwavering support and gratitude. In Congress, we must work to ensure our veterans.
I will tell them how humbled I am by the support I received from my fellow Vermonters.
So you have the people who are coming to work, and then, as you point out, inside those groups, you've got gang members and sex traffickers and everybody else. Encounters with migrants from different countries rose dramatically. Ecuador way up, Brazil way up, Nicaragua way up, by multiple orders of magnitude, these additional numbers. There's kind of these two messages, right, that we are, I don't know what this is. Do you think the Biden administration, by executive order, okay, Ecuador, 95,000 encounters. You can see just the huge spikes over time. You got these two contradictory messages, right? President Biden's campaign promises that are being used by the cartels to get people to buy into their smuggling programs. And then you've got your message from the Texas Department of Public Safety and Governor Abbott, who says if you come here, you're going to be arrested on state charges. Net, what are the cartels here, and what are the people wanting to come here for work here?
So that's, first of all, that's the reason right there. That's the issue right there, is the messaging. The messaging from day one from the federal government was to come to the U.S., that you will be released into the country. And they've seen that firsthand with families and friends that have come across that made that journey and get released into the country. So that messaging is also being exploited by the cartels and the smuggling organizations because they're profiting off of this current crisis for now. So they want these individuals to come across our borders because, again, that's money for them. And again, what we talked about earlier is these individuals that are coming across, it all has to do with the messaging right now. And of course, our message is that you come across Texas, you will be arrested. But again, now trying to incentivize some of these illegal immigrants by paying them, up to $450,000 a head, that's not going to help the cause right now. And again, organizations are going to continue to profit off of that and use that messaging to their advantage.
Yeah, well, they certainly have been, and we'll let you guys get to work tonight. Thanks for being with us, sir. Good to see you.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Godspeed. Be safe. We should know Kyle Rittenhouse's fate perhaps by the end of the week, what the verdict will mean for gun laws and self-defense in America. Plus, Steve Bannon coming out swinging after appearing in court for the first time today. But why do we care? And is this just putting Bannon back in the spotlight?
If the administrative state wants to take me on, bring it. Because we're here to fight this, and we're going to go on offense.
Without a prescription. Stop toe fungus and its...
Or they're going to be so burrowed into that structure that they'll be able to have their way. If they win the House of Representatives or the United States Senate in the midterm elections, they will have that cudgel to bring into the next election. This is not subtle, Joy. They're talking about this out loud. The strategy is to delegitimize the previous election and to give yourself the capacity to overturn the results of the next election. And they're just doing this in front of us. And part of what I think is so awkward about American politics right now is there's kind of a normal set of actions, infrastructure bill and the kinds of things that the Republicans and Democrats fight about in Washington, while at the same time over here, there's just this massive threat to the integrity of American democracy that is actually getting worse before our eyes. And even legal accountability, like hauling Steve Bannon in like this, he doesn't care. And that makes it very difficult to manage.
Well, that's the thing, is that you have two realities, Kurt, that are happening at the same time. There's sort of normal government, that you see with Joe Biden. You have some Republicans, there's a former White House communications director, Alyssa Farah, who's like, yeah, people should testify, people should honor subpoenas. So there's sort of norm core over here. But on the other side, there is this open, as Ben said, they're not hiding it. They're saying it on the radio. They're saying, yeah, we're taking this country over. Hello, we're taking this country over. They're announcing it. And then they're also saying, oh, no, the school boards are not trying to burn books. And then they're like, burn books, ban books, intimidate teachers, have Proud Boys standing there staring them down and scaring them. They're literally saying we will use force to command this country. And I don't know that the other side is reacting to that fully. Do you?
Yeah, I think that this is really the greatest challenge for Democrats, because the reality is Republicans are willing to do anything and everything. They have no moral compass. They have no code. There is no low too low for them to try to engage in order to achieve their means and try to take back power. There is a line for Democrats because we're ethical. We have a moral compass. We have actual values that we try to adhere to and live up to. Republicans see that as a witness. Republicans see that as Democrats handicapping themselves in this existential fight right now. I think Democrats just need to get more aggressive on just about everything, really, Joy. Whether it's fighting the Green New Deal fight, whether it's fighting education, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's voting rights. Every single time an issue comes up, Republicans successfully hijack it, and they've turned it into something that Democrats start being afraid of. You don't see really a lot of Democrats talking about the Green New Deal anymore because Republicans contaminated that into something that it isn't. They do the same thing with education and critical race theory, and I think that we need to take them on head-on, one-on-one, face-to-face, and we need to say every time that they bring up one of these issues, listen, number one, you don't have a monopoly on loving America. I love this country. This is the greatest country in the world, and I am proud to be here. Number two, our story, while imperfect, is one that I'm proud of, but I'm also proud of the pursuit to make it a more perfect union, to live up to the expectations that the founders set. Number three, if you want to talk about cancel culture, there's one party and only one party in America that's trying to cancel things, and it's the Republican Party wanting to burn books. We need to take these things on head on and not cower away from them.
We will have more of this discussion coming up. Unfortunately, we're out of time for now, but...
Gun. Sanchez crawled under the car for cover.
Was over, Sioux Falls had received an above-average 40 inches of snow. But what are these autumn skies telling us this year? Is it going to be a harsh winter or mild, wet or dry? We'll look at the skies and the science to try to find some answers in the KELOLAND Live Doppler Winter Special. Welcome to the KELOLAND Live Doppler Storm Center. This is where we spend most of our day calculating the type of weather heading your way, from La Nina to wind, water levels, and more. We cover it all today. Plus, meteorologist Scott Munt will try his best at predicting just how much snow we could see this winter.
First off, one of the big weather players in the winter forecast is the return of La Nina. What is La Nina and how will it impact KELOLAND? Well, let's explore those questions as we unpack the first clues about snow and cold this winter. First, by definition, La Nina is defined as a cooler than normal area of Pacific Ocean temperatures near the equator. It gets more complicated when you dive into the strength of La Nina across the various regions along the equator and the impacts on weather here in North America. Last winter, as you will recall, was a La Nina winter. It was pretty friendly to KELOLAND for mild weather most of the time. December was well above normal. In fact, the Northwest District of South Dakota had its third warmest December on record. The trends continued into January. We finished the month among the top 10 warmest through KELOLAND. But then February arrived and so did the cold. We endured a severe outbreak of sub-zero weather and finished with the 17th coldest February on record in southeast South Dakota. It didn't take long and the switch back to warm weather appeared in March. We again finished in the top 10 warmest for most of our KELOLAND counties. So what can we learn from last year? It's very well known that La Nina winters can feature two distinct patterns for KELOLAND. The first pattern was the one we saw in December, January, and March. The strong jet stream flow off the Pacific Ocean can provide segments of very mild winter weather here during the heart of winter. This is typically a much drier pattern than normal. The other face of La Nina isn't so nice. This is what poured into the United States in February when the jet stream buckled and allowed severe cold to pour into this part of the country. This winter will likely feature a moderate La Nina, similar to last year, but we can already see differences emerging. It's been a more active fall storm track, with these pre-winter storm tracks repeating possibly during the winter months. It's not just the temperature changes along the equator that we watch. Right now, a large plume of above normal water temperatures in the Pacific north of Hawaii could play a big role in driving cold Arctic air into the U.S. like it did in 2014. It all gets rather complicated, but fortunately for us, meteorologist Scott Mott will explain his take on what this all means for the official snow forecast coming up later in the show.
And the key is later in the show. While I won't give you an exact number, I've been doing this job at Keloland for over 20 years. When I started, I would hear people say it just doesn't snow like it used to. But over the past several years, I don't hear that anymore. Maybe it's because we've gone through several winters with heavier snow. We've dealt with what's known as the Cattleman's Blizzard from early October of 2013, when 4.5 feet of snow covered Lead and nearly 2 feet of snow in Rapid City. The storm came with falling temperatures, riding 50 to 70 mile-per-hour winds. It cost ranchers millions of dollars in lost cattle. Aberdeen recently recorded over 1.5 feet of snow during the last days of November of 2019. And there's the Christmas blizzard of 2009, when 10.5 inches fell in Sioux Falls on Christmas Day, helping the city to just under 30 inches for the month. But that pales in comparison to the snow in April of 2018, when over 30 inches fell in the month of April, almost 7 times our average April snowfall. Here's a look at the average snow broken down per decade since the 1950s. Sioux Falls saw their lowest snow in the 1970s, when a lot of record cold lows were being felt. Cold air has a hard time holding moisture. On the other side, the 1990s brought the heaviest, with an average of just over 46. We've stayed in the middle 40s ever since, while Aberdeen had their lowest in the 1980s. The bad droughts during that decade may be to blame, with Aberdeen's heaviest coming in the last decade with nearly 45 inches. Central South Dakota doesn't usually get as much snow, with the lowest decade average in Pierre being in the 60s with less than 25 inches. Last decade was their highest, with an average just under 40. Rapid City has had some impressive extremes, from a low average of 21.2 inches to almost 3 times that at under 60 inches last decade. Things can be analyzed as to why some decades produced a lot and some produced little. But I do find it interesting that the extreme cold of the 1970s and the drought years of the 1980s have the least amount of snow for 3 of our 4 cities, while the last decade produced the highest average in 3 of the 4 cities. Now, with some getting their highest snow in the last decade, I really haven't heard it just doesn't snow like it used to.
Well, when you think winter, like Scott, you think snow. But often we also get wintry mixes of sleet or freezing rain. Winter weather often brings mayhem.
Whenever precipitation of any kind occurs in the chilly winter, it is impactful. It affects travel, schools, workplaces, and even getting around on foot. It's why alerts are issued, so we can plan our lives around the annoyances that wintry weather sends our way. A winter weather advisory is issued whenever there is an expectation of sleet, ice, blowing snow, or snowfall that is over 3 inches. Occasionally, snow can come hard and fast for a short duration, perhaps accompanied by strong winds. When this happens, a snow squall warning is issued because of reduced visibility. This happened in April of 2020. Heavy snowfall results in a winter storm warning, hopefully preceded well in advance by a watch so everyone can get prepared. Did you know that winter storm warnings mean different things in different parts of the country? Here in the Midwest and in the northeastern U.S., winter storm warnings are posted when 6 inches or more of snowfall is expected. In North Texas and the east central U.S., 4 inches is cause for a winter storm warning. In Alabama, 2 inches, and in South Florida, a half-inch snowfall forecast would be enough for a rare winter storm warning.
How rare? Well, I couldn't find any evidence of one ever being issued in the Miami area, but the Miami suburbs did receive a few snow flurries one time during an exceptional cold spell.
And well, at one point or another, we've heard those old myths and those old wives' tales about wintry weather, but you gotta wonder just how much of what we hear is grounded in truth. There are a myriad of old myths about Old Man Winter. 2 of the most well-known involve this little critter, the woolly bear caterpillar. If his middle brown band is wide, expect a mild winter. If it's narrow, the winter will be severe. The second myth has to do with where they go. According to this myth, if the woolly bear travels south, a harsh winter is on the way. The latter is simply an observation of woolly bears searching for an ideal place to curl up for the winter.
As for the former, there's a little more to it. The coloring is dependent on a few things: how long the caterpillar has been feeding, its specific species, and its age, among other things. A good growing season means more food, which also means larger woolly bears and narrower brown center bands. Older woolly bears also have more of a red-brown color to them as opposed to black. Here's a phrase you may have heard before: big snow, little snow, or little snow, big snow. The myth hinges on the size of the snowflake being an indicator of whether a snowstorm will be a big accumulating event or not. There is at least a little bit of truth to this. Snow falling at temperatures closer to freezing are more likely to clump together and form larger flakes as they fall. This wet snow packs together pretty easily, making the accumulation process slow. On the flip side, smaller flakes form with a colder air mass in place due to flakes forming on smaller aggregates, and accumulates faster on the ground with that cold air in place since the snow doesn't pack together as readily. With that said, this is far from a straightforward setup. Atmospheric temperatures and other variables such as snowfall rates can tip the scale either way. For example, we're more likely to get heavier snowfall rates with the temperature near or just below freezing, while frigid air doesn't hold as much moisture as warm air when you consider smaller flakes. Both points would in turn debunk the myth.
And so while there is still some validity to those old tales and sayings, just remember to take them all with a grain of salt. After all, Mother Nature rarely plays by the rules, no matter how long those rules may have been around.
Well, along with how much snow fell, we'll get into more of the details about water content in that snow, too. Plus a breakdown of how that's determined when the KELOLAND Live Winter Special returns.
For practical gift ideas at low prices, Nyberg's Ace is the holiday gift-giving place.
Nyberg's Ace is locally owned and a fun place to shop for a variety of unique gift ideas and a helpful staff that can help you with the right gift.
Find great gift ideas in Nyberg's Ace Grill and Smoke, including Big Green Egg, Traeger grills, and accessories. And Nyberg's Ace is your decorating place specializing in popular LED light sets. Stop in to see our huge selection.
Nyberg's Ace is helpful all around Sioux Falls with 5 convenient locations.
It was just a great experience overall. Everything from the initial heart screen to then meeting with Dr. Feldhaus, finishing up with cardiac rehab here. I just can't say enough great things about it. It was an awesome experience.
Overall care at the Heart Hospital was exceptional. I think every person that we met throughout our time here was extremely warm, knowledgeable. It was a defining moment in our lives.
What if we said a bank isn't a place to lock up money? It's a place to set it free. What if the point of banking wasn't to bank at all, but to put your ideas to work? What if your bank asked, what if, a little more? Well, what if we told you we do? We're American Bank and Trust, where what if meets why not? If you're ready to change what you get out of banking, start a relationship with us. What if you made the move today?
Welcome back. One of the most difficult parts of forecasting wintry weather is also the most visible and deceptively simple. Of course, we're talking about snow totals.
They're the numbers that arguably matter the most and the ones that everyone looks for when a winter storm looms: forecasted snow amounts. At face value, it's simple enough to figure out how much snow may fall based on well-known rules of thumb. In actuality, however, it's far more complex. The general rule of thumb states that for every 10 inches of snow that's melted down, it equates to 1 inch of liquid water, creating the 10-to-1 ratio. In the upper Midwest, however, that's not completely true. On average, the ratio in our part of the country is closer to 12-to-1. This ratio is rarely the gospel truth. For this explanation, we turn to the thermometer, and not just at ground level. In general, more intense cold will beget higher snow ratios, since frigid air can't hold as much moisture. While that does factor into the equation, we also need to look at how deep the warm layer is between the ground and the clouds. A deep, warm layer will lower the ratio, while a shallow layer yields higher ratios. Lower snow ratios will also yield fluffier and heavier snow. The Easter 2020 snowstorm in eastern KELOLAND was a prime example of this, with liquid water ratios closer to 8-to-1. Consequently, snowstorms with a higher ratio will yield a finer and more powdery snow. One other consideration is what is within the cloud itself. If there's a higher concentration of ice crystals within the cloud, higher ratios are expected. If there's an abundance of supercooled water, that will lower the ratio due to the higher amount of available liquid water.
Unfortunately, big snow does not necessarily mean big moisture totals. One singular big snow event will only be a temporary fix at best. When it comes to long-term problems like the drought we've been seeing, what's more important is the frequency of these snow events.
Well, winter snow may not be fun to drive through, but when it melts, it sometimes provides a great runoff recharge for ponds, lakes, and streams. And as you are about to see, the total of the 2021 drought has been significant. Water runoff from snowmelt in the spring is very important to watch, especially for parched stock dams and the impact on cattle producers in Keloland. One key factor to watch this winter will be the amount of frost in the ground as we go into the snow season. The frost depth will help determine how much of the snow soaks into the ground versus running off into creeks and rivers. Speaking of rivers, the location of the most intense drought condition overlays the heart of the Missouri River Basin. Runoff into the Missouri River for the year is forecast to be 57% of normal for 2021. That would rank as the 10th driest in 123 years of record keeping, a number that should grab our attention. Drought in the Missouri River Basin is nothing new. The drought years during the early and mid-2000s was more intense, similar to the droughts of the 1930s and 1950s. La Nina winters can deliver heavy snow to the northern Rockies during the cold phase of the pattern like we saw this past February. The reverse is true during the warm phase and would be very detrimental to the spring runoff forecast. Knowing which face of La Nina will dominate the winter has several implications on the drought. Scott Munt will have more to say about that in his winter prediction coming up.
Well, this time of year, we don't just talk about the temperature, we also talk about wind chill, the way cold temperatures are magnified against our skin by the wind. But wind isn't all bad. In at least one respect, it can be good.
Wind is somewhat mysterious. It changes direction at speed for no apparent reason. And we can't see it, we can only see what it does. And hear it, of course. The wind blows all over the earth, mostly from a westerly direction, driven by the spin of the earth. What causes wind? Quite simply, it is the movement of air molecules as they swirl away from a center of high pressure, air pushed down by the weight of the atmosphere. The air movement, the wind, moves toward an area of low pressure, where it is drawn back to the top of the atmosphere. It is the swirling movement that causes winds to change direction, and the difference between high and low pressure that changes the wind speed. The wind seems to blow around here a lot, all times of year, and here more than most other places in the U.S. According to the U.S. Department of Energy, South Dakota is the third windiest state, behind only Nebraska and Kansas, and just ahead of North Dakota and Iowa. You may have noticed that power companies are taking advantage of our windy days. South Dakota is a leader in wind power generation. In fact, South Dakota's wind generation provides 8% of the state's electricity, about enough to power 250,000 homes. There are about 20 wind power projects in South Dakota, with plans in place to install another 900 or so wind turbines. The turbines are scientifically located where the terrain is higher, where winds are locally compressed, boosting the wind's speed to the turbine blades, maximizing electrical production.
Of course, even in Keloland, the wind doesn't blow all of the time, and that is one of the downsides of a dependence on wind-generated electricity.
And we have a variety of ways for you to stay up to date on the changing weather conditions. The options at your fingertips when the Keloland Live Doppler Winter Special returns.
I don't care what they say on cable news. Identifying as a Republican doesn't make you a racist any more than voting Democrat makes you a communist. On certain issues, one side may be right. On others, the opposing party may have the better argument. And sometimes right just lands somewhere in between. Here on News Nation, it'll be facts, evidence, and a dose of transparent opinion. No dogma, no overblown insults.
Dan Abrams Live, weeknights at 8, 7 Central on News Nation.
Clicking Add to Cart when you finally found the perfect Christmas gift? Yeah, that's Levo. Earning rewards got you pumped at the pump? That's Levo. A little bit of sweet freedom from the daily grind. That's Levo. When you spend confidently, when you get rewarded, when you make all the right money moves, that's Levo. And for a limited time only, transfer your high-interest balances to a Levo credit card with 0% interest. Levo Credit Union. Forward together.
It's time to find your next Chevy truck and forge ahead. Take on new challenges and take it to the next level. It's the perfect time to do more in your next Chevy. Find new possibilities, find new roads. Very well qualified buyers can get 2.49% financing and $1,000 cash allowance on this Silverado. Plus, unlock your code to claim $500 Chevy Cyber Cash on most Silverado 1500 Crew Cab pickups.
Welcome back. 1 year ago, drought was on the move and expanding across Keloland. But it's not just the visible signs of drought that we track. The water table underground is a very important part of the recovery we will be watching as we emerge from the winter pattern.
Drought cycles don't start overnight, and they don't end overnight either. Even with the fall rain we have seen, there are still large areas of drought across the plains of Keloland, mainly due to the long-term effects of insufficient subsoil moisture and a drop in the water table. To give you some perspective, I looked into some groundwater monitoring stations courtesy of the USGS. Take a look at the Sioux Falls area near Renner. The levels have been quite low, often below the 10th percentile the past 12 months. However, once the rain started falling in the Sioux Falls area, the groundwater levels began to improve. The Huron area stayed steady into June when the excessive heat and dry weather really took a toll on groundwater levels there. Now there has been a turnaround due to October rainfall. We can see a similar decline in the Black Hills with a monitoring station just west of Rapid City. We can see the same trend from the late summer. But when you put that data into historical perspective, the groundwater is still much better than it was 15 years ago in 2006. The winter weather pattern won't directly affect the groundwater just yet, but as snow melts and spring rains emerge, we'll watch the road to recovery across the most intense drought areas of South Dakota.
Some folks have already fully recovered, but the drought monitor will continue to show and highlight the pockets that are slowest to recover, even if we see some topsoil moisture relief through the remainder of the fall season.
And when it comes to staying up to the minute on the changing weather conditions, we have a variety of resources right at your fingertips. When we're not on air, you can turn to Keloland.com. Just go to the Weather tab at the top of our homepage. This will give you a variety of options from the current radars to live cams and links to road conditions. If you have a smart device, you can add our free Keloland Storm Tracker app. Now, just like our website, our Storm Tracker app gives you access to your latest forecast updates and advisories. It includes everything from the hour-to-hour forecast to the 7-day forecast and, of course, Keloland Live Doppler radar. Tap the gear icon in the upper right-hand corner and you can add or change additional locations and alerts. Now, another great feature of our app is the option to check out our clothesline for any delays or cancellations due to the weather. Did I mention you can also find updates from the Storm Center through our Facebook and Twitter feeds? You can find quick access to those through our Storm Tracker app as well. So as you can see, we try to provide you with a variety of options so you're never too far away from the latest weather forecasts and weather alerts. Well, up next, it's the moment that many of you have been waiting for. I give my snowfall prediction for the winter.
It's here. Our hearty and home-style menu is back, starting at just $8.99. Enjoy our classic pot roast dinner, pot roast stroganoff, fajita breakfast quesadilla, and more. And treat the family to a delicious, fresh-baked pie from Perkins Holiday Bake Shop. Take one home or order online at perkinstogo.com.
What if we said a bank isn't a place to lock up money? It's a place to set it free. What if the point of banking wasn't to bank at all, but to put your ideas to work? What if your bank asked, what if, a little more? Well, what if we told you we do? We're American Bank and Trust, where what if meets why not? If you're ready to change what you get out of banking, start a relationship with us. What if you made the move today?
Hi, this is Mike and Sarah Schulte from Schulte Subaru. We want to take a moment to share with you the Subaru pillars that guide us every day on what we think is the best way to interact with our customers and our employees. Subaru calls this HEART.
H is for honesty, E is for empathy, A is for appreciation, R is respect, and T is trust.
Schulte Subaru is committed to be a positive force in our community and improve the lives of those around us. So remember, be positive, be kind, and think Subaru.
Well, after many hours and days of locking myself in my basement and doing the research and listening to Christmas music just to get myself into the spirit, here's what I've come up with this year's prediction. As with any seasonal prediction, global weather patterns have a big influence on what to expect. One of the big drivers of our snow season this year will be La Nina. Brian discussed the impacts of La Nina earlier in the show. Now it's my job to interpret the type of La Nina weather we will experience. And much like snowflakes, no two La Ninas are alike. La Nina is expected to strengthen going through the winter, so I cross-referenced that with prior La Nina years. Also, the weather patterns leading into the onset of the snow season are important too, as the pattern tends to repeat itself through the winter months. This October started warm and dry, but it ended cold and wet. The tale of two halves made it a little more difficult, but I'll give it my best shot. Here's a look at the average snowfall dating back to 1950. Study these amounts closely, as I think many will be close or above these numbers this year. Many have average snowfall in the low 30s to the mid-40 range, though Rapid City sticks out at over 50 inches. Here's what I think will happen as we go through the season. We'll eventually lose our warm air from November, and we'll get thrown into the cold in December, and along with it, the snow. We'll have a little reprieve from the cold and snow in January with a possible February thaw for some. But don't let your guard down. I think temperatures will slide again in the early spring months, with above-average snow returning for March and April. Overall, temperatures will most likely end up below average, with snowfall being at or above average. Here's a look at the numbers I've come up with. In Sioux Falls, I'm going with a number slightly above average at 45.5. Aberdeen will also be in the 40s at 40.5. Let's go with a number in the mid-30s for Pierre, while Rapid City will be just shy of 60 at 58.4. So there you have it. That's my 19th yearly prediction. I've had some good years and I've had some bad years. We'll see what happens this year.
A little snowier than normal. I'm sure you'll be very popular this winter. Thanks a lot for joining us. This has been the KELOLAND Live Doppler Winter Special. Good evening.
These rooms are the central information point for the whole state of South Dakota. And on a day like today, the load is heavier than usual.
The plows were out basically to see if there were stranded motorists. Visibility was such that they couldn't continue.
Okay, wait. Fly from Montego Bay to Colorado, USA, for a touchdown in the snow. Westgate Lake gives you go. Tomorrow when you're up and away, will the baby swinging your way? Mr. Weatherman, it's over to you. May the skies be clear and blue.
The Last Chance Auction Company's legendary gun auction starts Wednesday, November 17th with rare decoys and continues Thursday, November 18th with firearms, ammo, and accessories. Both auctions online only. Bid now, lastchancesd.com or call 334-SOLD.
Developing stories and all that's new from overnight.
Plus, the latest on your hour-by-hour forecast tomorrow on KELOLAND This Morning.
KELOLAND, your home.
One of the hardest things has been taking care of COVID patients and having them not able to see their loved ones or say goodbye to their loved ones, holding the phone for them while their family members tell them their final goodbyes. I don't want that to happen again. If you can prevent it, I want you to get the COVID-19 vaccine.
In America, the future belongs to everyone.
It's one time for a lifetime.
Arby's, 2 for $6.
They coach, they lead.
Download C-SPAN now today.
Notable one who wanted to expand Medicare to include vision.
Making South Dakota communities better by design since 1930.
West Hills Village Retirement Community in Rapids.
But government, us or them, an eternal American debate.
Yeah, well, that in the debate, you rightly point out that sort of is the debate right now in our political landscape. I told you in the break we're going to have to cut this short. I want to have you back, though, and we're going to talk about one of my personal heroes, Patrick Henry, in the discussion. The book is The Cause, The American Revolution, Its Discontents. I'm going to head home and get through another couple chapters tonight. Professor, we appreciate it. Thank you. Dan Abrams breaks down more of the Rittenhouse trial just in a couple of seconds.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. Officers hit by a suspect when he throws his SUV into reverse. A lieutenant from the department will talk us through the explosive body cam video. But first, the closing arguments in the trial of Kyle Rittenhouse just wrapped up about an hour ago. His fate now in the hands of the jury. Rittenhouse, now 18, accused of shooting 3 people, 2 fatally in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Against the version of reality we've been force-fed. Here's one example. Just days after Rittenhouse was first arrested, that was back in August of 2020, a pro-censorship organization called PolitiFact published what it called a fact check of the case. In a posting on its website, PolitiFact claimed that Kyle Rittenhouse had committed a crime by carrying a firearm in the state of Wisconsin. Here's the quote. It is against the law in Wisconsin for someone younger than 18 to possess.
Brought the gun. What we learned today as the murder trial of Kyle Rittenhouse nears a conclusion, and Joe Biden throws a party at the White House as Infrastructure Week finally arrives.
Today, we're finally getting this done.
When All In starts right now.
Kyle Rittenhouse had one last chance to leave an impression on the jury.
You cannot claim self-defense against a danger you create.
At one point during closing arguments, the prosecution even demonstrates a moment where they say Rittenhouse pointed his weapon prior to the fateful chase that ended in the killing of Joseph Rosenbaum, even pointing out that in the aftermath, people believed Rittenhouse could have been an active shooter and that the crowd had a right to defend itself that night.
How are we supposed to know where he's going next? And I got to stop here for a moment and highlight the hypocrisy of the defense. Because according to the defense, if someone has a gun, they're a threat. If someone points a gun, they're a threat. There's only one exception to that. The defendant. By their logic, he gets to run around with a gun all night. But, oh, we're not supposed to take him as a threat. Doesn't work that way. There's no exception in the law for Kyle Rittenhouse.
Garbage. Just like his case.
The defense doubled down on its argument this was self-defense.
The state wants to call my client an active shooter. Kyle was not an active shooter. That is a buzzword that the state wants to lash onto because it excuses the actions of that mob. He runs 2 blocks from 63rd to 61st Scene 2 without firing his weapon.
Attorney Mark Richards argued Rittenhouse did what he did because he had to, especially in regards to Joseph Rosenbaum, the first of the 2 killed that night.
Kyle shot Joseph Rosenbaum to stop a threat to his person. And I'm glad he shot him, because if Joseph Rosenbaum had got that gun, I don't for a minute believe he wouldn't have used it against somebody else. He was irrational and crazy. My client didn't shoot at anyone until he was chased and cornered.
But during rebuttal, the prosecution argued there were plenty of steps Rittenhouse could have taken before shooting Rosenbaum.
No one is saying that Mr. Rosenbaum should have chased Mr. Rittenhouse. No one is saying that Mr. Rittenhouse did not have a right to defend himself. This case is about the right to use deadly force. Hit him, kick him, knee him, anything else. And Mr. Rosenbaum and Mr. Rittenhouse are alive.
In total, Rittenhouse faced 6 charges until the misdemeanor of a minor in possession of a weapon was dismissed early in the day over the gun not being long enough under Wisconsin statutes to be considered illegal in the hands of a minor. But Rittenhouse still faces 5 felony charges, all of which he pleaded not guilty to. The most serious comes from the shooting and killing of Anthony Huber, second of 2 people killed that night. Rittenhouse faces first-degree intentional homicide, but the lesser offenses of second-degree intentional homicide or first-degree reckless homicide could also be considered. Those offenses could be considered if the jury is not satisfied of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt on the original charge. In regards to the shooting of Gage Grosskreutz, who survived after being shot, Rittenhouse is charged with attempted first-degree intentional homicide with the use of a dangerous weapon. The judge said the jury could consider the lesser offenses of attempted second-degree intentional homicide and first-degree recklessly endangering safety. On top of those 2 charges, he also faces 2 counts of recklessly endangering safety tied to the shootings either at or near 2 people who were not killed, and first-degree reckless homicide for the killing of Joseph Rosenbaum. The jurors now get to decide the fate of Kyle Rittenhouse over a year after he killed 2 people and wounded a 3rd.
Members of the jury, the time has now come when the great burden of reaching a just, fair, and conscientious decision in this case will be placed wholly with you jurors.
Omar, in terms of jury instructions and deliberations, will when they